Hey everybody, this is Rydo, and we are doing the Steam Fall List Spring Cleaning Cleanup. Basically, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I look at new games that come out on Steam, along with playing Hearthstone and talking about video game news. If a game seems like it might be good, but isn't so amazing that I immediately want to buy it and cover it, I'll put it on the fall list, give it 6 months, maybe a year, to see if it gets enough reviews and if I'm certain that I really want to cover that game. Well, now 6 months has happened, or we're using the metric of anything that came out before January 1st, 2019, which is more than 6 months as of recording. It's time to go through that follow list and determine which games are actually good enough to go to the wish list. Most games probably not good enough, and will just be removed from the follow list, which doesn't really mean much. It just means they go back to being a regular game on Steam that I probably would never purchase or play. It's important to have the wishlist curated because I do ask people to support my channel by gifting me games, friending me on Steam, and gifting me games off that wishlist. And so that's the process we're going to be doing today. Starting with games starting with the letter P today, starting with Pamela. We'll be looking for some red flags, and Pamela is probably not the best example of a game because we can see here it's 71% positive of 487 reviews. This is a lot of reviews for a smaller AA, single A style game, indie style game. It came out March 9th, 2017. And it looks like it's a decent sci-fi horror game. The problem that we run into here, and this will be one of the red flags, is that it's in early access still. So this is, 2 years of being in early access. This game is probably never going to get finished. In fact, if I recall correctly, this game has like a Kickstarter backing of some sort, and people who supported it were upset for that very reason, that it looked like it's never going to be finished. And inherently, if you are supporting games via Kickstarter, you shouldn't, because nobody has the investment time tolerance that is really required. This is why publishing companies exist, is because publishing companies can in secret fund the development of a game for 4, 6, 8, maybe even 10 or 20 years to develop a game without the general audience and the consumers who would actually buy the game knowing about it. Thus, when a game like Pamela would finally come out on Steam, it would be a finished product. Early access has disrupted that mentality, the publisher system, and it has just disrupted the idea that you have to have a finished product when you put it on sale on Steam, for the worse by far. Other red flags we'll be looking for is we'll see if a game might not be relevant. If this game had been out for 6 months and it didn't even have 20 verified purchases, which is what this the number is. Verified purchases meaning that they actually bought it on Steam with their money. They didn't get the game for free or activate it by a key, which might mean that they got it for free or discount. If a game doesn't have that arbitrary number of 20, then by my definition, the game's not really relevant. Nobody's played it. It could be a hidden gem, but it probably isn't. I've not seen any games on Steam that were hidden gems for several years and then somebody found them and it turned out to be amazing. There's new games coming out all the time, so even if there are hidden gems in the Steam storefront, nobody's likely to ever find them. Other things we'll keep an eye out looking for red flags are price. $25 for a game that looks like Pamela is not a bad price at all, but the fact that it's early access is a problem. We'll make sure the games are single player because I only cover single player elements in on my YouTube channel. If you're playing a multiplayer game, that is going to heavily depend on who you're playing with, whether you're playing with friends or whether you're playing with a bunch of jerks. Also, if you're playing an older multiplayer game, the player base is probably going to be pretty low, so any online multiplayer type gameplay tends to be unattainable later on down the line. Some games like visual novels might have a bit of a benefit of having full audio English. It wouldn't really upset me though if Pamela didn't have full audio English, because I bet there's very little text or conversation that's happening there. If I was still trying to consider this game, I'd come down here and look at the negative reviews, because I find very little helpful in reading positive reviews, and we might look at something like this. Let's see, here's an early access review, because it's still in early access. It was posted May 18th. Alright. Let's see. I would be favorably speaking of the potential. It's beginning to feel like this may just be another game that isn't going to make it out of early access, at least not in the state anything close to what we were advertised as the final product. A shame is what it says. Yeah. Still lots of optimization as of March 14th. This is a person that received a Steam key, so they probably funded it too. So those kind of reviews aren't counted at the top. Yeah. Unfortunately, this is a case where I don't think I can continue on this journey. And this is a kind of great example of a game that visually has an attraction to it. And that's why it's on the follow list. In general, people are positive about it, but I refuse to play games that are unfinished. Like, I do not have enough hours in my life to play an unfinished product. It's just not worth it. There's a statement: all art is eventually abandoned, never finished, and that is a great example. This is a great example of a game like that, where you just kind of they need to find the elements to have a finished product to put it on sale. This looks to me a lot like Dead Island, where it's a zombie game and you're being attacked by zombies, although I'm not really seeing any zombies. This looks rather polished, rather nice looking in the trailer, but clearly people's experiences aren't lining up with that. And this also looks a little bit like a BioShock inspired game. That being said, it's just too late. It really is just too late. Frankly, if Pamela does come out of early access, I imagine somebody would cover it. Some mainstream video game site would cover it, and I'd hear about it again. So I came into this game thinking, oh, this is a bad example, because of course this is going to the wish list. As soon as I rolled down and saw early access and saw that it was originally released in 2017, now I'm saying actually it's leaving the follow list. And yeah, that's exactly what should happen. I can't in my mind make a special exception to just constantly have this on the follow list. If I checked back in 6 months, it's just too little too late. I don't even have another phrase to use. You only get to make your first impression once. They made their first impression March 9th, 2017. They have not been able to finish the product. I doubt they have any intention of finishing the product. If we look at their development, they have since released a game August 23rd, 2018 that's mixed reviewed. So that seems to strike me as being abandoned. I want to also warn, as we go through games, There will be some games and points where images don't load up. That's because I have so many Chrome tabs open that I'm using up all my RAM. And if we run into any adult games, I have a blurring function here that I'll be using just to make sure everything is YouTube friendly. Pamela is leaving the follow list now, and it's a shame. Usually it's a pretty easy decision whether something is leaving the follow list or not. So yeah, we'll have a bunch of images like this. Last time I just reloaded everything and it worked, so I think we'll probably just do that from now on. So we have this horror game, survival horror game called Pacify, which the problem with low effort asset flip horror games these days are you can buy visual assets pretty easily from Unity Store or Unreal Store, and you can make a game look really, really good. Looking at this video, it does look, at least for the building and the layout, very polished. There's elements, there's items, there's decoration and texture everywhere. It's not just a very bland, generic house with bland, generic nothing going on. That being said, there's still a long way to go to actually making a good game. I would argue the game Layers of Fear 1, of which a sequel has since come out, did a prime example of making a game where you bought a bunch of Unity assets and then weren't really good at programming, so you didn't make a game that actually had a gameplay mechanic worth playing. And yeah, this is a horror game. That doesn't bother me any, but it might affect viewership on my channel, but probably not. If anything, it might help viewership. And the jump scare games do sell pretty well, so you can see over its lifetime, this came out February 22nd, 2019, it's not even 6 months old. It's had 1,566 reviews and it's 86% positive. It's $4.99. It has single player and online multiplayer, so maybe the online multiplayer element of this is catching people's attention. 16 achievements seems like a fair amount. Sometimes I'll call a game an achievement game if it's like 99 cents and it gives you 100 achievements, or if it's really cheap and it gives you only one achievement, because Steam will highlight if you get 100% of all achievements. So having only one, it makes it really easy to accomplish that. Let's look at the negative reviews. Generally speaking, I don't like playing games like this. And when I look here, you have trash, 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 it sucks. These aren't very helpful. There isn't much to do. It wasn't as scary as advertised. Roblox is scarier than this game. Let's see. Some of these feel like they're like troll reviews, but why would you activate by a key and waste your time putting a troll negative review? Implemented it poorly. After 30 minutes I gave up. Game maybe has a hour of max of gameplay. 2 friends and myself finished it under 20 minutes. Game loses its scare factor after first try. Can get a few jumps from it after that. This is probably what I was expecting. Although I wasn't expecting the not helpful troll reviews. Clearly this game was sold cheaply on some other storefront, or keys were given away to get so many reviews. And it goes to point out that the review system isn't as helpful to me personally as it could be, because if I was just to go with mob rule and say, well, 86% of the people liked it, therefore I should cover this game, what I'm ignoring is the fact that people are seeing these screenshots and these videos and they kind of know that it is a low effort jump scare game and that's what they were looking for. Whereas I'm personally not looking to play a low effort jump scare game. If we looked at this developer, it is from the developer of Emily Wants to Play, which is, it's kind of the exact same idea, just being resold. And each of these games is rated positive because streamers play these games and it gets little kids to buy it, I suppose, is best I can guess. So Pacify, not my type of deal. In comparison, if I was going to play a horror game like this, I would play the Fear series, which I own, which is a first-person shooter with a scary girl, or I would play any number of AAA games that are in the horror genre somewhat, but have an actual gameplay element. Even things like Amnesia are better choices because they were close to the first of these kinds of games, and now that we're running into a lot of people just making similar clone jump scare games that get worse and worse with each attempt. Next game we have to look at is called Packet Storm, and this came out February 28th, 2019, so actually I shouldn't be considering this game. It should be given a couple more months, but I'm going to look at it anyways and just see what it is. You play an AI developing a new internet service provider. Each game takes place over a few seconds of game time, but potentially many hours of real time. Buy up routers, upgrade cable networks, and deal with the packet jams. This is kind of like a networking simulator game, which the concept sounds slightly interesting. The implementation, from what I'm seeing here, doesn't look particularly interesting. In a weird way, this kind of is like a job game where you're doing somebody's real actual job in the real world, and anybody's job is probably going to be pretty bad and not fun. Let's see. The first review that was most helpful is, this is not a horrible game, but it's a stripped down game. I would give it thumbs up if I bought it for $2. How much do they want for it? $8. Yeah. I don't see anything visually appealing to this. The good news is my standards have been increasing, so even games I added less than a few months ago to the follow list, now I can see clearly that they have no reason to be on the follow list, let alone the wish list. I would also say that when I am looking at new games on Steam, there usually is about 50 to 100 games that come out every couple of days, so I'll get mentally tired and not willing to make a tough decision at that point, and so I'll just run out of emotional energy is what I usually call it, and say, alright, well, let's just put this on the follow list and I'll decide it later. Now we're doing the cleanup. Now is the time I actually have to make decisions. And this is a game that is a great example of something where I'd probably need to make a tougher decision than what I have. 1 second, I'm going to drink some water. So, well, look, we have Pahelica, is best I can pronounce that. Revelations HD. This is tagged an adventure game. To me, it looks like it's a point-and-click adventure game. It is 90% positive with 2 verified purchase reviews. 10 verified purchase reviews. That is an incredibly small amount for something that came out 4 years ago. So this game falls under the category of being irrelevant. It is said to be in HD, but then there are black bars. There's really no way you would have black bars in a 4:3 ratio instead of a 16:9 ratio if you're in HD. 720p, 1080i, 1080p, all of those are going for for a 16:9 ratio, so the HD is kind of a lie too. $9.99 for this game. It's from an unknown developer I don't recognize. It has 18 achievements. I don't think there's anything here. Yeah, I really don't think there's anything here that would make this a worthy adventure game to cover. It's not like I have any nostalgia for it. Here's the, I guess, other game. So Revelations might be a sequel to this other game that only had 4 reviews. Yeah. That you see better polished games that are point and click adventures than this, or adventure games. This kind of feels like a hidden object game more than even an adventure game or point and click adventure, but I'm not seeing any hidden object elements. Yep. If this was something that came out in 1995, this probably would have been a decent product, but 2015, you're just a couple decades too late. So Pahalika, for lack of a better pronunciation, Revelations is leaving the follow list. I think it wouldn't be surprising if all the games left the follow list for one letter of the alphabet. This is possibly going to happen, but I would be a little surprised. We still probably have a decent number of games starting with the letter P. Next we have Paintball Chibis. Although I would argue what is being depicted here kind of doesn't fall into the category of what most people would think when saying chibi. Chibi is an animation style when a character normally is depicted in their standard anime style, and then a chibi, which I think just means small in Japanese. A chibi version of that character would be shown, usually when they're acting childish or silly. This looks like some weird European cartoon or something. This does not fall into that category. It's tagged as a shooting game without violence, and I see exactly why I put this on the follow list. It's because I was looking for a Splatoon clone, because Splatoon is only on the Nintendo Switch, and the idea of a paintball game or a shooter for kids style game is an intriguing one. Now, there is a Splatoon clone on Steam that is a shooter without violence, but it definitely isn't for kids because it's Sinran Kagura Peach Beach Splash, which is a bunch of anime girls in bikinis shooting each other with water guns. So a kid-friendly version of that still is not something I've found. That being said, this came out December 27, 2018. It has 0 reviews. It has no relevancy, and visually it is not polished enough to look interesting at all. You have very generic backgrounds, very generic skybox, generic user interfaces. There's just nothing visually attractive here. So yeah, Paintball Chibis is definitely leaving the follow list. Really shouldn't have been on the follow list in the first place, and I'm running into that more and more. Some of that may very well have to do with the fact that I always am going to go through these lists chronologically, alphabetically, not chronologically. So my standards could be very, very high in doing games starting with A, B, C, and by the time I get down to XYZ, my standards may be so low because I'm just mentally exhausted that I'll leave more games on the follow list because of that. Although I'm trying real hard not to leave anything on the follow list. It's either it's going to the wish list or it's not. Of course, we're only looking at the subsection of games on the fall list that met either the metric of having 20 reviews or being released before January 1st, 2019. This next game we have is called Pandemic Express: A Zombie Escape. This is 68% positive of 1,076 reviews. It's from the publisher Tiny Build. Tiny Build is, I guess, a little inconsistent with what it releases. I don't really see anything here that would make this game sell as time goes further on. Seems like it's a kind of generic zombie shooter style game, except for that maybe there's a railroad involved in it. Sometimes it seems like you play as a zombie. It's a multiplayer game anyway, so that factor alone, since it's multiplayer only, tells me that I can't play this game. By the time I got around to it, it would have no player base. And that probably is half of the complaints, so we don't really need to even look at the reviews. Tiny Build is weird, certainly. They put out some things that catch people's attention, like Hello Neighbor and this spin on this Battle Royale version of Hello Neighbor called Secret Neighbor. But then they also put out some weird things that I particularly am not interested in. I would say Tiny Build is probably in the top 5 of publishers that when I see their name, it doesn't stand for a quality game that I'm interested in playing. It stands for something that I'm going to have to put some more scrutiny on. So, of course, Pandemic Express is not making it to the wish list. It's getting removed. Let's see. Next, we have a game called Paper Dolls Original, and then a bunch of Asian language, which means it might be a cheap Chinese game. Although, looking at this trailer, this hardly looks like a cheap Chinese game. This looks like an attempt at a much more polished horror game. I don't try to follow or wishlist too many horror games. Mostly because I only want to play really, really scary games during the month of October. I don't want to fill my YouTube channel with random scary things, because horror, whether it's movie, books, video games, or any other way, is always kind of this separate niche or category that people sometimes steer away from. The average person will go to comedy movies, they'll go to drama movies, they'll go to action movies, but then they'll draw the line at horror movies and just not watch them at all. And they will say that specifically just because it's a horror movie, not even try to understand, well, there's some horror movies that are worse than others. So looking at this and looking at the screenshots, I'm seeing some polish. Over its lifetime, it's 65% positive. In the last 30 days, it's been 76% positive, so it's not particularly great. A great fix or great reviews. $16.99 is pretty expensive. April 23rd, they said they're going to fix the QuickTime events from disappearing too fast. That might be the issue that people are having with it, to bring it up to 76%. Is a useless statement. I received this product for free, but that's not influenced my review. Totally it is. Whether you realize it or not, if you spend money on a game versus getting it for free, you're going to feel a little bit different when at least going into the game. And that's going to set you down to a path to feel a little bit different with your review of a game later on. Let's see. Negative reviews. April 21st. Frustrating keys that don't respond to input even when they're pressed correctly. Creepily awesome ambience. Starts out great, but as you play the game, it'll get kind of easy. Get annoyed by the quick time buttons. Been playing for more than 5 hours, and even though there will be updates or sequels. Very disappointed with the ending. Oh, also the stressful actions and movements of the character. So, what we're also seeing here is of 140 negative reviews, most of them are not in English. Like, only 2 are in English. Everybody else that hates it seems to hate it in Japanese. Or Chinese, I'm not sure which. So, what I could do here, instead of deciding right now, because the decision I would make right now is just leave it, take it off the follow list. This almost certainly is like a Chinese developer. It's called Beijing Lichi Culture Media Company, so this might be a decent Chinese developer. There's a lot of bad Chinese game developers out there, particularly since China has implemented a law where they're not licensing the sale of games inside of China to anybody very easily, and they stopped licensing any games for like 6 months. A lot of Chinese developers started putting their games on Steam after that, and since they're going down that path, they've just continued down that path. The thing I could do here, though, is I could see if they actually fix their mistakes. This hasn't been out 6 months. It's gotten a lot of reviews, yes. It does seem like in the last 30 days, for the 43 people that reviewed it in the last 30 days, that it's going in the right direction. There looks like there might actually be an experience to have here, and Asian inspired horror games are not very common. So yeah, I'm gonna give this 6 months until the next follow list cleanup, and we'll see what the reviews say there, because it came out April 19th, 2019. If this had come out before January 1st, 2019, I would say just remove it. But I'm going to give them a little bit more time and leave this one on the follow list, which is not something I do very often. Like, I've only left maybe 3 or 4 games on the follow list. So hopefully it's not the beginning of a trend. Next we have a game called Paper Bark, which says it's a charming game that tells a beautiful short story of a wombat. It's tagged as a walking simulator. This looks like this might be an interesting little walking simulator story style game for like little kids, I assume. Over its lifetime, it's 91% positive. It's got a bunch of awards. It does feel like it is just telling a story, so this might be super short and super simplistic, which might hurt the value of it. There seems to be some small bit of collectibles that you also have to do, so there's more than just walking around, which would nullivate this walking simulator user defined tag, because that would not be accurate. It says it has full audio in English, although it's a wombat, so it's probably just wombat sounds. 25 achievements might be a little high. $8.99 might be a little high too, but I'm not too upset by that price. The only thing I might want to research is just seeing what the average play time is. About 3 hours, 1.6 hours, less than 1 hour, 2.4 hours. Let's look at the negative reviews. There's 3 negative reviews to 36 positive ones. Really enjoyed the gameplay and idea, but I think an $8.99 for that short game is too much. I really hope it bigger before release. People don't know how to type or read what they're typing. I've been guilty certainly of that too, however, where I've typed things and then looked at what I've typed and skipped it over entire words. The other reviews, the product looks beautiful and sounds very authentic, but it barely qualifies as a game and has a bug that can only be solved by force closing it. This person played for an hour, 1.8 hours. This one played for 1.7 hours. I think mob rule in this case overwrites that when we have so many other people saying positive things. Paperbark is our first game actually making it to the wish list. For a second there, I didn't think we were going to find a game actually worth it. That being said, when it makes it to the wish list, and I have to put my money where my mouth is, I will certainly look at this game and go, $8.99 is probably not worth it. But during a Steam sale, if this gets down to $4.99 or $3.99, then it would certainly feel like it's worth it. And there's lots of other games on Steam, on my Steam wishlist, so I'd have to compare those around. Now this is interesting because we have the same game in VR. Paper Dolls VR. And I was willing to give Paper Dolls a chance, but I'm almost certainly never going to buy a VR headset. Them developing two separate products on two separate Steam pages seems odd, to say the least. It seems very, very weird that you would try to do that when you're not really succeeding, or you don't have a defined success in the first place. This is an example of exactly what I don't want to see on Steam happen, is that people start selling twice as many games by having a VR version and a regular version and charging for both. Skyrim VR, I believe, also does that. I own Skyrim and was upgraded for free to the remastered version, but I do not believe I was upgraded for free to the VR version, even though I don't have a VR headset and probably will never have one. That being said, if I was to buy a VR headset, maybe I would keep this on the follow list as one of the VR games I'd want to look at. Unfortunately, it's 69% positive. It seems to me that this is still an example of they're working on it, and I'm gonna have to assume that the VR version is way worse than the regular version. So fingers crossed, Paper Dolls VR is going to get removed, but Paper Dolls, I believe, is going to stay on the follow list. Fingers crossed they will spend their time and energy fixing the game that will sell to a much larger audience, which is the non-VR version, and it will turn out to be a good game. And this is just a bad attempt at making a VR version, and a bad attempt at advertising a VR version, because there was nothing on the main game that said, hey, we also have a non-VR version available over here. Click on this link. Or there's nothing on the non-VR version that said, hey, we also have a VR version. Paper Dolls VR, don't have to really consider very much. It's not making it to the follow list. Next, we have a game where you have to log in, so this is an adult game. With Steam implementing two-factor authentication, it's not worth the effort to log in. So we're just going to skip over any adult game that is so tagged. Some of the adult games don't require you to log in, some do. And some of the adult games have actual nudity and not family-friendly stuff on the store page, which I think is frankly just growing pains, and Steam should clean up their storefront and say no. Even if you're selling a hardcore porno game, which we're fine to let you sell, the screenshots need to be censored and the descriptions and stuff need to be still at least a little bit family friendly. That's how it used to work in movie rental stores that would have a back aisle or a back room with porno available to rent on your VHS or beta. The cover of the box was usually not uncensored. So I think that's probably just a way to do business. Next we have a game called Paratropic that looks very weird, although it's 81% positive of 225 user reviews, verified user reviews. Frankly, I don't think I could want to play this game. It just looks too weird. It feels like it's trying to throw back to the original Alone in the Dark art style, as if that's something to be nostalgic for. This extremely low polygon art style. It seems like it's trying to throw back to Silent Hill 1 and things like that, where you would want to take the story and the concepts and the feel of those games, not the appearance of those games. Let's see. Here we have negative reviews. They're saying they're calling it Desert Bus 2019. Visuals were stunning, but there were few and far between terrible driving sequences. I got the bad ending, which means to play again I would need to drive the car for what feels like an eternity. This game could have been something great, yet it feels like a walking / driving in a straight line sim. Okay, so the driving sections are super long too. Yeah, even without hearing that though. Yeah, visually this is just so bad. I couldn't overlook that for a game that came out in 2018. So that's leaving. Next we have the game Pathologic 2, which Pathologic 1 seems like it is a cult hit, but I'm not 100% sure if that's really true. It might be a cult hit, or it might be that the advertisement on this is just putting it out like it's this cult fan favorite. And then there was a Pathologic, I believe, 1 remaster that was released a while back. So what this really would boil down to is I would have to really do a deep dive into this weird looking game in this weird looking world to try and figure out what's going on. And I wouldn't be surprised if after playing the original game, playing the remaster, maybe skipping the original game and just playing the remaster, that I wouldn't be surprised if I still don't have a clue what's going on. And I am not directly opposed to those ideas. It's just often that is used as an excuse to hide the fact that a game is not well thought out, or that there's no coherent thought in this. And yeah, sometimes when you go to screenshots, they won't load until you cycle all the way around, and then they'll load the second time. Again, I assume that's because I'm out of RAM. In all honesty, some of this does just look like an asset flip horror game, but then you see things like this that feels like there's actually some kind of RPG element to it, and this that feels like there's different locations to go to, and things like this that seems like it's might be some mini games. Yeah, I really don't know what this is, but I guess what I have to do is just go with mob rule. You don't get 579 people to review your game and get 83% of them to say it's positive just because you've made a random asset flip game. This is English and Russian, and sometimes if I see games that are English and Russian only, I think they're low effort troll games. Same is true if I see something that's English and Chinese only. In this case, I think I can't really make that assumption. I've heard about Pathologic too much. Here's Pathologic Classic HD. which would be the remake, and very positive. So it seems to have this kind of cult following of some amount. Let's see. I could look at the negative reviews, but it doesn't really even matter. And I feel like if I did look at the negative reviews, it would just spoil the game twist. So Pathologic goes to the wish list because mostly because it's something I don't understand, and I would like to understand the series and play it. I might play the first game for an hour and get bored after that point, but I'd like to give it a try. And until I know if I like Pathologic 1, I might as well have Pathologic 2 on the wish list. I probably wouldn't accidentally buy the sequel before I bought the first game. And I doubt this is the kind of game where it would make sense to play the sequel before you played the first game. We are still with games starting PA, so there might be quite a few games starting with the letter P. Next we have a game called Pato Box, which is a surreal boxing quest with a duck. Test your reflexes. This is 80% positive with 26 verified purchase reviews. The reason why I would have put this on the fall list is because I love the Punch-Out game series from NES and arcade, and they made some other ones, Super NES and I believe Wii, a Wii game that's lesser known. So this, I think, is some of that, but there also might be some mini game elements here. So the black and white surrealness is also weird, and clearly there's some other elements to this. But I like weird games. This is certainly something that a lot of people wouldn't have seen before, and I like Punch-Out, so it's got a couple of things that are catching my attention immediately. $14.99 is something I definitely don't like. This really does feel like a $7 game. It is supporting an odd combination of English, Spanish, and Japanese. People seem to select Spanish-Spain on accident a lot of times, when they really mean Spanish-Latin America. But I don't know if that's the case here. 73 on Metacritic's not terrible. We could look at the negative reviews, but there's only 5 of them. Really wanted to love this game. I love Punch-Out. It's my favorite series of all time, but this game just does not work. It's frustrating and no fun at all. I hate myself for not recommending it, just avoiding it. Let's see. But yeah, I have 2 negative reviews in my language. I have 40 plus reviews in positive. I think Pato Box deserves to be on the wish list. Again though, this is an example of a game that when I have to put my money where my mouth is, if this does not get down to about $5, I probably would never buy it. There's almost certainly always going to be better games on the wish list than this at that price point. $15 is a AAA game from like 5 or 10 years ago, not something that's an indie niche game like Paddle Box. Next we have Paw Patrol on a Roll. Now, I've in the past wanted to cover a lot of kids games. That being said, I've kind of given up on that idea. There's not a lot of good kids games on PC, and it makes not a lot of sense in retrospect to try and cover them. Paw Patrol, very possibly by the time I got around to playing it, would not be popular amongst any youth. I don't know if right now in 2019 there is any episodes of Paw Patrol even airing. Uh, so, yeah. This came out October 23rd, 2018. It's 84% positive. By my standards, it really should be on the wish list. But I think I probably would never want to buy it. It's $29.99. It's probably super short, and that's definitely super expensive. We could look at the negative reviews. I bought this game for my kids 4 and 7 because a friend recommended it to me. My kids don't have any active video game experience. They were absolutely gleaming when they realized they can play with their favorite heroes. However, after 1 hour of gaming, they already got bored out by the ever repetitive levels and challenges. There's actually not much of it to achieve. AI is at least not in the first 5 levels, and even my 4-year-old girl was irritated over the fact that she was very limited in her actions. The levels are not very lovingly designed, and it offers little interesting. After only 2 levels, my big one had enough. Save yourself your money, don't buy this game. The default key binds are terrible, and despite having options to rebind stuff in the launcher, none of the rebinds actually work, so you're stuck with arrow keys instead of WASD. Horrible game to teach your children how actual PC games should be controlled. It gets the job done, but it's a bad game. Well, it's awful. A mentally challenged monkey could finish this game. Yeah. Inherently, this is the problem you run into with kids games. Even Nickelodeon branded kids games is they're in bottom of the pile games, things where very little effort is put into them. They aren't designed to be fun or entertaining to an adult, or not designed to be fun or entertaining to a kid. They're just selling on the hope that there's some name recognition in the characters, and that there's some name recognition as far as the parents or the kids. Now, if I was to just go with mob rule, I'd say yes, this should go on the wish list. I think the answer, though, is no. I really don't see a reason to cover this. That's not to say I'm giving up 100% on kids games on Steam. I've given up probably 60-70% of as far as kids games on Steam, but yeah, this is not the direction I'd want to go. So Paw Patrol on a roll, leaving the follow list. Let's see. Next we have a game called Pawn of the Dead, which is early access and came out August 27th, 2018. I'm always looking for a game that might be an interesting way to play chess. And looking at this video, this looks like it might be an interesting chess game. Although I don't think you're actually playing chess here. I think you're actually transforming characters into zombie versions, and it's just like it's a combination of the zombie idea and chess, which is weird. I'm gonna drink some water. It seems like the chess pieces never take up a full board, so instead you have randomly generated levels. So it's an interesting concept that's not polished enough. And I guess I had hoped that this would have been more polished as a spin-off of chess, with, I assume, a mode in which you can just play regular chess. But early access since August 27th, 2018 tells me that it's never going to be finished. It's $3.99. We could look at the reviews, but it seems like only one is in English anyways. Meanwhile, if you wanted to play chess, Tabletop Simulator, again, is a question to play. or you could play the free-to-play Simple Chess, or you could go to chess.com, which is probably your best bet. This is tagged as English and Turkish as the language, which is weird. Yeah. When some of this looked interesting, the idea of having characters in the real life try to do something like Battle Chess did many decades ago and look like they're actually fighting is something I'd actually like to see. I'd like to see a modern Battle Chess. If the developers behind a fighting game decided to make a new Battle Chess and use all their fighting animations to do that, that would be really cool. But this is nowhere close to that, so yeah, no more consideration is needed for that. Next we have PC Building Simulator, which is rated very positively at 88% of 6,782 user reviews. This came out January 29th, 2019. I believe this was just in early access before that point. There is some DLC tying it into Razer. I don't think this overclocked edition does anything other than sell more cases. There's something I think to be said about how well this developer has partnered with so many game PC component developers to build and simulate actually building a PC, which in all fairness, building PCs these days is way easier than it used to be, and a lot of what you're doing is mostly just clicking a button. In a weird way though, this game also has you running a computer shop where you're scanning for viruses and trying to make money. So there's a unlimited mode where you can build something that will look somewhat similar to what a real computer build would look like, and then you should have the name of the parts and the models of the model numbers of the parts that you would actually need to build a real computer. It doesn't seem like it directly ties into something like Amazon.com or Newegg or any PC parts picker, any website like that. So you can't have this 3D simulated experience of building a PC and then just export your build into a store and actually have that those computer components sent to you. And if this game does not start you off with a tutorial where you are shocking a computer and ruining it by hitting it with a static shock or by accidentally leaving a screw under the motherboard, then you're really not having a good education as a starter point of things that you should avoid to do while building a computer. There's still a few things you can do accidentally to ruin your $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 PC. That being said, now that this is out of early access, this is polished enough and something I would be fine owning and covering. The overclocked edition is $25. The regular edition is $20. Frankly, this game should be free in coordination with Newegg or PC Parts Picker. Unfortunately, I used to buy all my stuff from Newegg, but they got bought out by a Chinese company, and at that point they're kind of less likely to honor rebates and less likely to treat you nicely in the customer service department. And so there have been, over the past 4 or 5 years, a lot of complaints about Newegg. The only option other than that I know of that's really something I would consider, it would be to buy it from Amazon.com, and then at that point you're going through Amazon's website, which is not designed particularly well when looking for specific computer parts, and you kind of don't want to have to buy everything from Amazon.com and help them become the mega monopoly that we all know they will eventually become. Although that's not having anything really to do with this, so let's just move on. Did I hit that twice? No, just once. So next game we have is called Pinkura. I don't remember this game. Came out December 19th, 2018. It has 7 user reviews, so it's not really relevant. It's still tagged as early access. What is this? This says, travel to a distant alien world to an ancient singularity, settle your base, build helpful bots, craft equipment, and seek answers to a lost civilization. So it seems like it's an adventure game on a different planet. Okay. It might just be a walking simulator. I've seen games certainly that have a very similar story to this and end up being nothing but a walking simulator. Notice all we've seen so far are hallways and hallways and some kind of elevator system. And this is taking particularly long to show us anything. Had to jump through this 4-minute video to a point where you see something actually outside. Now we're seeing an arm. Now this seems like what the actual game was. So more than half of that video was an intro cutscene, and the actual game is a top-down strategy game. That's pretty deceptive advertising. Don't really have to get mad at this game though, because in the end it's not relevant one way or the other. There is some disconnect here. There does seem like there's a first person mode with shooting, but then there definitely seems like there's a top-down strategy simulation building mode. $9.99. Apparently it's at version 0.1.2.2, which means it's nowhere. And we could look at the reviews if any will load up, but I wouldn't be surprised if none of them actually load. Meanwhile, if you wanted to play an adventure game where you're on a different planet, well, I don't know, Doom, maybe? I don't know what to say. It says, here we have one from December. This game has only under 10 minutes of play available. It ends as soon as you complete activating the medbay chamber, stating that the game is locked until the next patch. So, yeah. This looks terrible for a game. There's nothing here that would convince me to put this on the wish list. Let's move forward. I feel like I'm losing a little bit of steam here, so we want to move forward as fast as possible. Next we have a game called Phantasma VR. There's an old horror adventure game called Phantasmagoria. I don't think that has anything to do with this. It's a puzzle game with a strong narrative where you step in the shoes of a deranged mind searching for the truth about a conspiracy involving a TV show hosted by an annoying bunny. This sounds deranged for sure, but this might... Often I'll see game descriptions like this and it's just that somebody wrote some gibberish to explain a bunch of asset flips being put on the screen and weirdness being put around. So I don't know what's going on here. This is 96% positive of 26 user reviews. And this is different. And different in VR is very much appreciated, because most VR games are just stand in one place and shoot at zombies or some other creatures that are walking towards you. This at least looks like a puzzle game. Let's look at the negative reviews. There's only 2, but otherwise I think this will just stay on the follow list for being weird. It's a VR game. Again, probably never going to buy VR, so I probably would never buy this game anyways. But if I was to get VR and I was looking for different things to do, this certainly would be in the top 10 of games to consider. Here we have one. It's a functional game, but does not fully work with Oculus Rift in the default configuration. That's not a complaint for me to really care about. Puzzles don't make sense. There's puzzle relating to Paris, which is impossible because there are no clues or direction or hints that will lead people to understand how to solve the puzzle. Therefore, the game cannot be finished. And the developer responded to both of those, and I'm sure it's some generic response. There probably is some other things to consider to this, but I think this could stay on the follow list. This company is calling themselves the Shady Gentleman, which is not useful. And this next game they're releasing is called Steam Dolls. It's tagged with nudity, so it's coming soon. Seems like they're trying to make products and sell them in a reasonable amount of time. So yeah, Phantasma, it can stay on the follow list. Let's see. Next game we have to look at is Photographs, which came out April 3rd, 2019. This is a game made by somebody I follow on Twitter. I follow a lot of game developers, so I've seen a lot of people. I've seen that person talk about it a lot. Basically, as I understand it, there's a mystery of some sort that you uncover by scanning over the photographs and getting clues from it. So the photographs look like just happy regular photographs, and then they start changing, or more gets revealed in the photographs, and it unveils a secret of some sort. I've not been trying to spoil myself completely with it, but yeah, it seems like a small indie sort of game. It's $11.99, which is maybe a little too expensive, but on sale I'd be willing to play it. It could also be not that interesting, but it is 75% positive of 32 user reviews. If I was to look up the negative reviews, let's see. We have beautiful, poignant game with decent puzzles, short and bleak. Wish I was able to see the other endings, and that's not recommended. Series of 5 tragic vignettes that offer a glimpse of some at the life of a downtrodden character. Essentially, you take pictures of something in a scene with a clear hint for each one, and then you're presented with a puzzle to solve the order to see the picture. See a picture which comes with some narration from the main character of whatever vignette you've played. Story is great, but the puzzles are just so frustrating, and it spoils the experience. Puzzles aren't going to ruin a game for me. Like, I can solve puzzles pretty well, so I'm not afraid of that. I will say, looking at those reviews, though, it does seem like this probably is not for everybody, and this probably is one of those games that a lot of people would enjoy a lot better if they just saw a playthrough of it instead of playing it themselves, which, as a YouTuber, as somebody who does playthroughs of games, means Photographs is exactly my style of game. And so that is going to the wish list, which is good because that means we're actually getting a few games on the wish list, whereas I thought we may have none. Next we have a game called Photon Cube. I imagine this is a laser puzzle game that I was thinking about playing and wanted to see if I could get enough reviews on it so it would be relevant. And since this came out June 27th, 2018, and it's from a publisher called DL Site, who's kind of known for publishing not that good of games, this kind of fails to meet that characteristic. It's not relevant. It is just a laser puzzle game, of which there are hundreds on Steam, and none of them have ever been that good. This one seems to have an anime spin on it when you really don't need to throw the anime spin on there. There are definitely people that wouldn't play a game because they saw an anime character on it, as much as there are people who will play a game because they did see an anime character on it. $6.99, and since it has like one review, there's kind of no reason to even consider it. So Photon Cube is leaving the follow list. Another example, frankly, of a game that I could have made that decision and never put it on the follow list in the first place. Next we have Pierhead Arcade. Now there's about 3 VR games where you take on the experience of being in an arcade or a bar. Usually they have skee ball, usually they have darts. This one seems to have bowling and basketball too. For a lot of people, getting to a arcade that has these types of games is really hard, because a lot of the skee ball, a lot of the arcade style games have since been replaced with things that have been modernized or that are in some other way not familiar, and you're not nostalgic with them. The other issue with games like this is how well any of those one elements plays as an actual game. Does the bowling really feel like you're bowling? Does the skee ball really feel like you're skiing? And there's not a lot here in any of this. It's maybe 12 different games, so you would hope that each one of those works. And then drinking Coke machines and building playing card things is odd that it allows you to do that. This one looks pretty good. It's 94% positive, came out September 21st, 2016, and requires VR. It's $9.99. So your choice here, let's see, between games are Rocket Ball, Basketball, Bowling, Comet Drop, Arctic Shuffle, Super Punch, Binary Dash, Honey Rush, Shooting Gallery, Scrabble Toss, or Scarab Toss, Dino Whack, Cannonball Bounce, Rapid Fire, Claw Machine, and Zombie Shootout. None of those are labeled as skee ball because that's probably copyrighted. So this seems like a good version of this. There's a couple of games like this on my follow list, and because it's VR, it will just stay on the follow list. This looks good enough. That being said, you spend $300 to $1,000 on a VR headset, you kind of expect something like this to come out for free in the same way that Wii Sports came out for free, and you kind of hope that this is as infinitely playable as Wii Sports was, and maybe that's not the case, particularly since this would require either online multiplayer to play with other people, so 2 people would have to have an extremely expensive VR headset. It doesn't sell very well. The one thing I'd really love to see about these kind of games too is if they could just drop the VR element and just let me play this using a controller and a VR and a regular 3D avatar character. I would be happy to be able to play a lot of these games with just a controller. even if it doesn't feel as realistic. It still probably doesn't feel very realistic to play these games. But yeah, this stays on the wish list. Next game we have on Steam is called Pig Eat Ball. This came out September 26, 2018. It has 15 reviews, 93% positive. What I thought this game was when it came out, if I'm recalling correctly, I definitely remember the name. I thought it was kind of a Pac-Man style game, or a twist on a new Pac-Man style game. Looking at it now, it seems like it is kind of just a random assortment of weirdness in general. Regardless of whatever it is, it runs into the problem of not being relevant at all. People have been given 6 months and nobody wanted to play this and review it. It's $14.99. It's got a high Metacritic at 83%, so this might be an example of a game that's a bit of a hidden gem. It's got 52 achievements, so it might be an example of an achievement game. But yeah, what I am seeing just doesn't catch my attention. It seems like it's weird for weirdness sake, and it feels like a troll game more than anything else. And unfortunately, that element is the problem, is that there's so many troll games out there now. If something looks a little bit like a troll game because it's weird, or feels a little bit like a troll game because it's weird, people want to stay away from it instead of giving it a chance. So Pig Eat Ball, without even looking at the reviews, is going to leave the fall list. I'm very much not interested in it, just looking at it. Next we have a game called Pinball Wicked, which I'm a sucker for pinball games. So the only thing I guess was this was early access last time I looked at it, and it's still early access now. And there's really no way that a pinball game should be early access. It should be the table that comes out, or whatever tables are in it, should be fully polished. If you were going to put out some more DLC or beta versions of the table and update your game to have a beta 4th or 5th table added to your game, that would be fine. In comparison to like Pinball Arcade or Pinball FX, they put out new tables all the time, and none of those have ever been in beta or early access. It really doesn't make a lot of sense. Even if you did put out a table that played really badly, you would just patch it. You wouldn't immediately make the assumption that it's in early access and is going to have to be added onto later. Early access really only makes a lot of sense when you're talking multiplayer games, and even then it usually doesn't make any sense. So for their abuse of the early access tag and not coming out of early access in 2 years, Pinball Wicked is leaving, which is fine because I have plenty of Pinball Arcade games and Pinball FX games, and so there's already 2 major platforms with a lot of tables that out there on Steam. Although if you're trying to buy a good emulation of the old pinball tables, I'm not sure you're in a great position at this point, because you'd have to buy Pinball FX3 tables, and I'm not sure that they're going to feel as realistic as they should, although I haven't experimented with it. Most Pinball FX games did not feel like a realistic simulation of playing pinball, but they did say they were going to try to make the ones based off of real world tables feel more realistic. Next we have a game called Pineview Drive Homeless. This is 68% positive of 58 reviews, came out April 5th, 2019. This seems like this is another horror game, and unfortunately horror games can be low effort and still look really good these days. And I think that's very possibly what I'm looking at here is a game that's just accomplished an interesting looking trailer without having an actual interesting looking game, interesting playing game. Some of these games will suffer, they'll have screenshots that are so dark that I've started calling it dark screenshot syndrome, where it's a flashlight that barely shows you the center of the image, and then it's just blackness for a third of the entire screenshot. This game does a good job of not running into that, even in this edge over here where it's pretty dark. There's bits of tones and hints of trees, where I've seen screenshots where it's just complete blackness. And this is an example. This clearly is a flashlight, but it's not complete blackness. And really that just comes down to setting the brightness correctly when taking your pictures. English and full audio in German. Let's see what the reviews say. Giant nope. Using batteries for your flashlights is one thing, but once you run out, that's it. You're literally fumbling in the dark. That's a yikes from me. Seeing a lot of negative reviews here. I tend to agree that there's nothing particularly impressive about this. It's probably made it to the fall list because it had no reviews when it first came out, and I was being overly generous. By today's standards, by the standards I would use today, this game would have not made it to the fall list in the first place. We may have quite a bit to go if we're at just PL. Next game we have is called Plans, which I have no idea how you'd really pronounce that. Game where you need to solve both simple and challenging puzzles, arrange the pieces into a whole block. So I've seen this puzzle before. It's kind of a Tetris style game. Is there anything more to this? For it's 99 cents. I probably put this on the fall list because I would like to play this kind of mini game, although in all fairness, this kind of mini game probably also should be a like hacking or lockpicking mini game in some big AAA game, and some used as a secondary game mechanic to break up the repetitiveness of a standard first-person shooter style game mechanic. That's not what I'm saying, though. It seems like it's just this puzzle, but for 99 cents, that's not too big of a problem. Also, I would applaud this game for not falling into the category of what I call a single screen Unity game, because the screen actually does slide downward. It's not like panning the screen upward, downward, left, or right. It's particularly difficult in programming, but it does seem to be a hurdle that people who make low-effort Unity puzzle games cannot get over. And you see a lot of Unity games where it's just a generic background, the puzzle is on one screen, there's a ton of buttons usually, it looks like a cell phone game. This one is avoiding a lot of that. So yeah, unless there was a negative review here, and I'm probably just looking for trouble, even if I was going to look here. There's 11 negative reviews to 59 positive reviews. I think this game sells itself, honestly, as a simplistic puzzle game. How many puzzles are in it? That's a good question. Let's see. Bargain price, Steam achievements. Left and right. It has a sequel for 99 cents and some other games they're trying to sell. That's not too odd that you would make sequels. Says that this one says it has broken controls. The 22nd level is unbeatable. It does not load the last piece. The first 20 or so levels are solid, but after that it devolves into these massive boards with hundreds of different solutions. There are two types. One, wide open boards, where you can basically just randomly place the first 90% of pieces and then barely think for the last 10%. Two, tight closed off boards that are still huge but require you to start thinking when you have lots of pieces left. Let's see. Here's a complaint about playing it on a 2-in-1 laptop. That's not a very helpful review. The sequel has 19 reviews and is positive too. I think this is good enough for 99 cents. I think this deserves to go on the wish list. Now, in fairness, maybe I would never get around to playing this or purchasing this because it is kind of simplistic. This could also be a game that for 99 cents I play up to level 20 and then once it gets hard I give up. The achievements would be the only thing stopping me there. We don't usually look at achievements, but let's see. Seems to me like there's an indication of at least 21 achievements, 22 achievements, 24 levels, 31. Yeah, there's at least 40 levels in the game based on the achievements, so that tells me a bit more information than the description does, which the description should really tell me that it has at least 40 levels, although I'd kind of want to see it have 100. So perhaps you have to buy the sequel to get another 40. But yeah, it seems to be selling itself pretty honestly and not doing anything too terribly, so this will go to the wish list. Let's see. Next game we have to consider is Plane Mechanic Simulator. This came out February 13th, 2019. Now, I really have no desire to ever be a plane mechanic, and quite frankly, it looks like you're working on planes of the World War II variety. Yeah, it says England 1940, so that's not even going to be something that you would do unless you have an antique plane that you're still maintaining and keeping flight ready. So that kind of falls apart in that idea. Might be an interesting simulator job, though like so many job simulators, you are just doing what was at one point somebody's actual job, which is probably pretty boring, particularly here where you're going to be working for the British Royal Air Force, which means you're going to have to do it with the military procedure hanging over your head in part. This is early access, so do I want to give this more time, or do I want to put this on the wish list? I guess it's early access, so I can't put it on the wish list. So then the question is, do I want to give it more time, or do I want it to leave the follow list? I don't know. I think I'm probably being too generous here, but I think what I want to do is give this a little bit more time. Since it hasn't had 6 months, I'll give it a little bit more time to come out of early access. If it's not out of early access by the next time I do a follow list cleanup, then I'm going to remove it. If it is out of early access, I'm going to reevaluate it and think about it again. Because this really is iffy. Like, I wish listed, I'm pretty sure, the car mechanic simulator, because I can actually imagine that at some point in my life it might be helpful to be able to know how to fix a car, or at least understand what someone else is doing in an attempt to fix my car. Any knowledge you learned in this simulator to be a plane mechanic would be completely useless for almost everybody. It's not going to help you be a modern plane mechanic, really. It's not going to help you maintain any antique plane that you might run around with. So it just becomes a little less relevant. But I'll give it more time to come out of early access, and maybe it will have something that it adds as a selling point. Next, we have a game on Steam called Plasticity, which is very positive. 84% of 88 verified purchase reviews. It's free to play. I think this might be a student project also, or is just a small indie game. It looks like it's mostly just a adventure game, sort of kind of like Limbo, except for the black and white elements. Let's see. This free game was created by students of the renowned UBC Games program and contains 20 to 40 minutes of content. So I like to highlight student projects, so Plasticity is going to go to the wish list. It's a free game, free to play game. It doesn't have any in-app purchases, because that would say that right here. It probably was published by their college and their school, although it's being published under a actual name, where usually a college will publish it under the college's name. USBC would be the University of Southern California, I believe. So yeah, it should really say publishers, the University of Southern California. And developers should probably say the name of each of the students who developed it. Is a much better way to label that. Now, this is probably a game that I would ignore if it was free and it wasn't a student project, in all fairness. It's not a game that I think is particularly bad or anything, although it is obviously extremely short. But if I saw this and didn't know it was a student project, I'd just tell people when I saw it, here's a game, it's free, go play it if you want. I have no real interest in covering free products, because as a video game critic, I see my criticism as almost 100% consumer advice and purchasing advice. If the game's free, you really don't need my advice at that point. You can make your own decision and just get the game or not get it. Let's see. Next game we have is called Plumber the Pipe Rush, which came out July 7th, 2018. It has one user review. The reason this is here, I can clearly see, is because I wanted to have one of these Pipe Dreams games that this is basically a clone of Pipe Dreams. I believe it was an NES game or a Windows maybe 95 game. It was popular to a small amount, not to a real large amount. This same kind of gameplay was used as a hacking minigame in BioShock 1, and that's where I imagine a lot of people may see it these days, if they're seeing it anywhere. Unfortunately, my desire to see a Pipes style clone does not beat out the fact that this is an irrelevant game, and this doesn't look particularly good, and this really just has too many strikes on it. Also, it wants $3.99 when really it should be a 99-cent game. Games that they're saying are somewhat similar to this are in no way close similar to that game, and that's part of the problem of Steam's recommendation engine. It's still pretty bad. Yeah. There's just no relevancy here, so Plumber the Pipe Rush has to leave. Next game we have to consider is Pocket Rumble, which is mostly positive, of 113 user reviews. This came out February 1st, 2016. This looks like a pixelated style fighting game. Alright. So I'm not sure how many fighting games I'd want to cover, and this certainly would be a game that is more going to be labeled as a niche game than a game that needs to be played. This certainly isn't going to be among the likes of a Blaze Blue or Street Fighter or any of the major fighting games that I don't even know which are the most important to play or to cover. It seems like there's not a lot going on here otherwise. The only thing I could think is that this was a multiplayer game only. I'm also seeing there's early access still, and that's a problem. It is single player and has online and local multiplayer, which is exactly what you need in a fighting game. It needs to have all three of those. It's English and Japanese. I can see a little bit of Japanese influence here, but not a significant amount. Fighting games are pretty popular in Japan. Unfortunately, the early access just kills us. Like, they've been given their time. They've been given years and years to come out of early access. Clearly, this is an abandoned game, and clearly this needs to be removed from the follow list. That's a shame, though, because it looked pretty good, but I'm not willing to cross that line. Next, we have a game called The Poisoner Demo, which is a VR game. The question is, why is it just labeled as a demo instead of the actual game? Let's see. Platform VR made this. They have a game called The Poisoner, and they label it as a demo. They don't have a non-demo version. Normally, if you were going to put a demo on Steam, it would say demo free, download now, and then buy the game for 99 cents. Instead, they're trying to sell you a demo for 99 cents, and they're saying it's a VR escape room. Meanwhile, there's been plenty of VR escape rooms that have come out. This is 80% positive of 10 user reviews, but that came out October 10th, 2018, and that's not enough reviews for any real relevancy. It seems like this kind of is just all over the place in what it's about. Also, although I will give it some slight props for having characters that actually look like characters and arms that actually look like arms instead of a lot of VR games where you just have floating hands. Yeah. Otherwise, though, this fails. It really fails. Developers abandoned, according to this review. It's buggy. Developers released it to make money off the unfinished product. I tend to agree. That's exactly what this is. I don't even know really why this is on the follow list. Maybe I had hoped. Maybe I had just hoped that it was gonna get finished, but clearly it isn't. And that so many other games have come out and I've looked at them and seen them that waiting around for something else is not realistic. Next game we have to consider is Poker Stars VR. The first thing I'd want to confirm here is that this game doesn't have in-app purchases, because then you'd be playing with real money and that would be a problem. This says it's online multiplayer only, early access. Playing online poker in VR, and it is an interesting idea, certainly, but there is a problem then, because you're playing with people who have the money to own a VR headset, so they're probably a little bit better at playing poker to start with. There's at least one VR poker game where the player can just take their head stick it through the table and see the cards from the bottom side of the table and cheat that way. This is not that game, but I've seen that meme run around. Overall, this is 87% positive, but in the last 30 days it's been 65% positive, which I assume means the player base has dried up terribly. In the end, it doesn't matter, it's early access. This game, even free to play, needs to be abandoned as far as being a good poker game. I'm still looking for a good poker game. It does not work, according to a review that came out June 5th. The algorithm needs rework. People start calling this River Stars VR due to the fact that so many hands had been won on the river. So doesn't work according to that. It's blocked in Washington. Don't try to play if you live in Washington State or get a VPN. Interesting. The new update messed it all up. Game stopped working since last update. So maybe they blocked it in Washington. Although I don't know why you would block it in Washington, because it seems like access to in-game purchases may be restricted by location, it says. So there is some in-game purchases that aren't just cosmetic elements. Interesting. Well, regardless, I really don't need to dive deep to figure out what's wrong with this game. All I need to see is it's still in early access since 2016, and yeah, it needs to leave the fault list. Let's see. Next we have a game on Steam called Polybius, or yeah, Polybius is how that's pronounced. Now, as I understand it, and I could be getting this story completely wrong, there was a urban myth of a game called Polybius in arcades that either didn't exist or there's very few of them ever existed. The urban myth of an arcade game called Polybius then expanded to a game that was like evil in some way, killed people, caused people to play until they died. And I think it did look very vector based in 3D is what the urban myth is. Somebody finally took that general idea, as I understand it, of this game and made their own Polybius for, I guess, the name recognition or just for the joke itself, and you end up with this. Without that urban myth, there's, I guess, not a real reason why you would want to play this, and it does look very flashy and neon, and it looks like it very possibly could cause seizures. It's a VR capable game, but doesn't require VR. It's 95% positive of 65 user reviews, and personally I don't think I'd really want to play this too much. I might give it like 5 minutes and that would be it. It's $17.99. So this might be a case of a game that I'm just gonna say it's not for me. That might be the best way to deal with this game. Meanwhile, in comparison, I have Res Infinite. I want to cover that eventually. It's at the top of a list. Certainly, if I have enough, if I had more musical ability, I try a game like Thumper, and those are better implementations of surreal and blindingly bright colors, music style games. So I'd recommend both of those first. Geometry Wars might be a good comparison too. I don't know if I'd particularly suggest Heavy Bullets, but I think other people would. There's only 3 negative reviews. Let's see. Can't recommend this game for non-Lima soft players. Let's see. Can't tell what's going on most of the time due to too much colorful vomit on the screen at once. Awful port, wrong resolution. Yeah. Yeah, I think Polybius is just not the game for me. That's what it really just boils down to. Yeah. Too much bright, colorful things on the screen annoys me and is hard to follow. So moving on. Next we have Portal Stories Mel, which is a community-made mod for free. This should just put it on the wish list. This was one of the first games I ever put on the follow list before I started using the follow list in the way I do now. As such, it doesn't particularly fall under the category of a game that I'm trying to think about playing. It's really just a game that's a free community-made mod for Portal 2. I want to play it at some point. It's kind of hard to justify to play a free game, that particularly if it's community-made. This came out in 2015. You can see it's overwhelmingly positive. So yeah, whenever I get in the mood to play Portal 2 again, I'll get around and playing Portal Stories Mel. I think there might have been some early access to this, but it must be finished by now, I guess. Yeah. I don't see anything here indicating that it's not a finished product. Of course, playing mods for games, even one of my favorite games like Portal 2, isn't really consumer advice. If you want to play this game, it's free. Install it now. It's really just a personal decision. And I don't have too many games on the follow list like that. Quite frankly, soon after I put that on the follow list, I started using the follow list for visual novels and adult games, and then I realized that's not really going to work, so I needed to instead use it for games that I was uncertain about as far as what's on the wish list. And if an adult game is good enough to be on the wish list, it should just be on the wish list, even if it's not going to ever be of a quality that I can or of a product that I could show on YouTube, because it's full of nudity or something like that. So yes, there are a few games on the wish list that are adult only, and if somebody was to gift that game to me, I would thank them greatly, but then I'd have to probably not cover it at all on YouTube until I can figure out some system. But I definitely want to support the video game industry of all types and kinds. Next game we have is called Posable Heroes, and this is seemingly going to be a long video at this rate. Although it was frankly seeming long even an hour in. This came out October 25th, 2018. It has 9 user reviews. I kind of like the idea that seems to be shown here, where you're posing stick figure characters in a way that you're trying to make kind of a keyframe, which would be an animation way of explaining it, where you're locking in a character at a very specific position in the hopes that they will the algorithm will decide that they will go to the right position. Usually when you do a keyframe, you have a start position and an end position, and the algorithm will figure out the middle positions, but then you'll probably have like another start position and end position, and that's really what this feels like, is you're just using software like Blender to keyframe and animate the poses of your heroes. So yeah, each time you click it, then you just press play and you watch the animation. This is early access from 2018 though, so it's clearly not a product that I think would ever get finished because it's just so ambitious. It really is so ambitious. And frankly, trying to teach people how to use Blender, which is an incredibly complicated software, is really, really hard. It's also English and Russian. That's a bit of a red flag. It's $15. That's a bit of a red flag. They have no negative reviews on it, but the early access element tells me I cannot trust this. Posable Heroes is going to leave the follow list. Next, we have a game called Post-Human Sanctuary, which is tagged as an RPG. We haven't been looking at very many RPGs today. This came out July 27th, 2018. It has 6 user reviews, so again, not a lot of relevancy here. I assume what this is a bit of a zombie survival game, although it seems to have some card gameplay elements in it too, and some RPG fight elements. Unfortunately, I think this is going to be an example of a game where it just did not get enough publishing, enough advertisement, enough hype around it, and probably doesn't have enough polish around it. It's still early access, which is the definition of not being polished. It has no negative reviews. But just being unfinished is enough. Is there anything here that would be a good comparison to it? Probably not, because it's probably just going to be recommending a bunch of terrible mixed reviewed zombie games. Like, none of these are recognizable games. I've never heard of any of them, and they're all zombie games. Yep. Post-Human Sanctuary, unfortunately, not making it. They don't have any other game that they've made. And you pretty much have to ignore this comic book cutscene. The real game, for the most part, plays through this screen. Next, we have a game on Steam called Pray for the Gods, which was P-R-E-Y for the Gods, and then Bethesda, being highly litigious and suing people, they're fans of suing people, threatened to sue No Matter Studios if they didn't change their name, so they changed it to P-R-A-E for the Gods. And this is because Bethesda claims to have a trademark / copyright for the word pray, P-R-E-Y. I don't know really why they would have a valid copyright or trademark for such a simplistic phrase. What Bethesda could probably do, instead of suing people, which they've done many times, is just use their own name, which is a pretty good name. Most people think Bethesda games are usually pretty good. So if you just called it Bethesda's Prey, Bethesda's Fallout, Bethesda's Doom, because Bethesda owns id Software, the makers of Doom, that would work a lot better than trying to own copyrights on things they really shouldn't own the copyright on. If anybody had enough money to take them to court for half of the things they claim they own the copyright on or trademark on, they would lose for sure. But they have the money, and so then they can get away with it. And Bethesda is owned by ZeniMax, which at least one point owned Oculus Rift too, before Facebook purchased it. But that's a lot of conversation not talking about this game. This is an action-adventure game. It's early access. It came out January 31st, 2019. I guess I have to give this a little bit more time. It kind of looks a little bit like Horizon Zero Dawn, I believe, which is the Sony PlayStation exclusive game where you're fighting robots in a post-apocalyptic future in a kind of snowy environment with a bow and arrow. So it seems like it's kind of in that field, except for it's actually on PC. There's quite a few Sony PlayStation exclusives that would they come to Steam would sell very well, but they're not likely to happen, at least in the next couple of years. I'm gonna give this a little bit more time until early access is out. I kind of don't care what the reviews have to say or anything has to say. That being said, since this came out January 31st, 2019, next time I do a fall list cleanup, it may very well get removed just because there's not a lot of time left for this to make a good impression and come out of early access. I would also say there's maybe some problems here too of this coming out and not finding an audience in the first 6 months, but I'll give it some more time. We don't have too much more time. This next game is Precipice, and this looked like one of the weirdest videos I'd ever seen on Steam, and I thought it might be a troll game, and I still think it might be a troll game. This might be a Russian troll game. A game of diplomacy and war in the atomic age. Safeguard your closest allies and charge unfavorable regime and change unfavorable regimes without giving away your long-term ambitions. Every action risks an enemy reprisal, and if nobody backs down from the standoff, we all lose. So I think maybe to make this feel a little less political, they went with the animal masks and the animal characters. So you have an eagle playing as the US president, and a bear playing as the Russia president, which I guess makes it feel a little bit less like a troll game and makes it last a little bit longer as a game to sell, because you don't have to update it every time there's an election in any country. That being said, this looks very, very weird. And here the bear is trying to push the nuclear button. The real game, though, is just going to be something similar to Risk, I imagine. But there is a room to play here. I'm thinking of Risk. I think that's the name of the game I'm thinking of. $11.99. 80% positive of 76 user reviews. The only thing I'm concerned about is, does it have a single player mode? Seems like it does. And is this possibly just a troll game? It's English only in the language, which kind of gives an indication it probably isn't a troll game. It's the US versus the Soviet Union, so it's during the Cold War. World leaders from 72 countries realized as animals native to the region. Interesting idea. Seems like there might be a game here. There's a similar game called DEF CON Everybody Dies, where you are just nuking other countries in a multiplayer fashion, which is not exactly what this game is. And there's some other games of similar style. Let's see what the negative reviews say. Turn-based strategy game with a fantastic concept, but falls apart due to poorly executed gameplay, bland AI, and lack of rewarding replayability. This person got it for free. Risk-like game I'm not a big fan of Risk. While there are some cool ideas and work here, I found the game to be quite dull. The game isn't ready for release yet. I'm all about early access. This was in May 5th. This is May 20th. So these reviews are, as of recording, pretty new. The game is well put together and is in general good, however it crashes a lot on my PC. Not really helpful complaint. It might have more to do with your PC than anything else. Content is very repetitive. The two sides don't feel very different, any different. The AI seems to do the same play every game and follows the repetitive part. The other side seems to never back down on default difficulty and has a twitchy finger when it comes to nukes. The space race doesn't do much when achieved. Arguably, the space race in the real world didn't do much when achieved. $11.99 to potentially play a game like this only once. Well, here's the thing. This should go on the wish list for the simple fact that the only Risk game on Steam, not Risk of Rain, this Risk game from Hasbro, is 41% positive of 183 reviews. So if you want to play Risk, don't buy Risk. So many of these Hasbro games are so bad, and this thing has like only 3 screenshots. It is so bad, and that would be $9.99 to play that. Arguably, Risk is not much of a game anyways, but this does seem like it's better than that. So I'm gonna put Precipice on the wish list, knowing that I might only play it once. I am satisfied that it is not just a troll game. If it was a troll game, it would be cheaper. It would have more achievements. It would be not trying so hard, quite frankly, to actually be a good game. And it does seem like they're still updating things also. So maybe by the time I purchased this and played it, it would actually run pretty well. Moving on. Next game we have to consider is Pressure Overdrive, which is tagged as a shoot 'em up arcade co-op. Let's not watch the trailers of the game, of the logo. I would have sworn that Pressure Overdrive was something completely different. There must be some other game called Overdrive, something that I'm thinking about. This seems like it is a Steam-based Mario Kart racing game, although I wouldn't really call it Mario Kart as much as it feels like a shooter, kind of a shoot 'em up / racing game, which is an interesting concept, certainly. This came out July 26, 2017. Is it in early access? No, we've been running into a lot of those. 3 worlds with 30 plus levels, so it might be a little short, but I think I'm good. Let's look at these negative reviews. If you haven't played the original Present, then I recommend you do this. But despite that, there's no information that this was a remake of the original game on the store page. Even the intro is the same. Also, this is there are less upgrades than in the original game. The only things that are notably different are the fact that the pressure is almost irrelevant now. You don't need to rush through it, so there's no real action in the game anymore. Also, the mechanic where you can aim, which pretty much could have been in an update. The original was more fun than this, even though I only spent $2 on this. After an 80% coupon, it felt like a waste of money. They sent me a coupon, I didn't like it. So can you play the original Pressure? Because maybe I should play that one. I doubt this would recommend the original Pressure if that's around there. Pressure returns with Overdrive. I guess that is... the description here kind of is telling you that it's a remake, or somewhat of a remake. Let's look at this and see if they have the original Pressure game on sale. No. Okay. Sometimes you run into scenarios where it feels like the games are originally removed from Steam just to sell the sequel, or because of a license in the audio or something like that that you really will never know the reason for. So do I want to go with Mob Rule, 75% positive? This doesn't look particularly amazing as a game. It seems like it's a shoot 'em up while racing combo, which is a slightly interesting idea, but not something I really was yearning to see happen. Feels like there probably is some grinding to get coins to purchase more things. There's no in-app purchases, so you probably will have to grind races and shoot enemies. It feels like that might also be really, really annoying because you'll have to focus on racing on top of shooting enemies. Yeah. Unlike Mario Kart, where you just have the other racers and you can either use the upgrade power-ups or not, this seems like you're just constantly having to shoot enemies. And 3 worlds with over 30 levels actually isn't that good. I kind of would prefer to see 100 levels, because that's what when even they're describing them as levels instead of racetracks. If you'd said 3 worlds with 30 tracks, then I would feel real different about it. So do I want to put this on the wish list or skip it? And I'm clearly getting mentally tired at this point because I'm having a hard time making a decision here when the decision probably should be a lot easier. I think what I do is I put this on the wish list. It's a close one. It's just barely. It's too expensive by far. I'd want to see this at $4 or less before I actually bought it. But I don't see another game anywhere close to this that I could compare it to. So it's kind of unique, and variety is something I'm always looking for. So yeah, I guess that's really what it comes down to. I wish Steam's recommendation engine was better so that they could recommend some games like this if any games like this exist, but I can't really think of anything like that. There definitely have been some F-Zero clones that are high, fast-paced games that have some small amount of ability to shoot, or Mario Kart clones, but nothing that is a shoot 'em up first with a racing element second. And that's what this feels like. So let's move on. I'm hoping we're close to the end, but I have no idea. We have a game called Preventive Strike. This is 64% positive with 14 reviews. Came out June 15th, 2018. This is a helicopter shoot 'em up game, and I'm not really a fan of shoot 'em up games. This is probably a name that would get downvoted just by the name alone if there was an easy way to do that, but there kind of isn't on Steam, thank goodness. It's $1.99. It's got 5 achievements. We can look at it. It's probably super short. It's probably repetitive. It's probably everything you would expect from a $1.99 game. Is Bomber Crew. I think I may have eventually bought Bomber Crew, but still haven't gotten around to playing it after a year of people telling me I should play it. There apparently is no English negative reviews, or I'm out of RAM, so that might be the case. Every time I reload the pages and it uses more, it loads the images, that's more RAM getting used up. At least for a while, and then Windows 10 will eventually stop using the RAM and write it to a hard drive, or Chrome will do that. Awful, the overused bloom effects make bullets hard to see, and it's already impossible to dodge as they don't have any kind of pattern to them. I think that's probably all I need to see. It's bright, it's loud, it's hard. Is it good? I wouldn't say so. Insanely difficult. Yeah. Yeah, Preventative Strike. I don't even really know why this is on the follow list. Like, there really is nothing here that would have caught my attention. They're definitely not my style of game at all. Next we have a game on Steam called Prime Mover. All the games are on Steam, so I'm saying the wrong phrase. It's 89% positive of 76 user reviews. This seems to be... It says it's a circuit board designing game, but it's kind of just like a puzzle game. I don't see anything here that looks like circuit diagrams as somebody who was trained in electronics. What seems to be happening here seems to be a bunch of numbers that don't really make any sense. Unless you're talking analog voltage. Like a plus 33 volts and a minus 17 volts is kind of high for a circuit board. It seems like this is the only screen where you really do anything. People liked it though. Is it an early access? No. So let's look to see if there's any negative reviews. Otherwise, I guess this just goes to the wish list. The programming language in 2D. If you like answering questions like how do you multiply in brain, I guess this is brain F word, or how do you sort in brain F word, then this is exactly for you. For a non-programmer, this is a big task with high difficulty, maybe impossible, if you're not mathematically talented. And I don't know if programmers inherently are super mathematically talented, always anyways. It seems like a fun game sim to the Zachtronics games, which is, I think, a fair comparison. Zachtronics games, makers of Shenzhen IO and Not Human Resource Machine, which is another programming machine game. I've covered that one. There's been a whole series of programming games that have come out on Steam, and I think this one is easily skipped. This one says it's it contains spyware. Annoying later levels. Can't easily move parts of the circuit you can copy, that's just not enough. Can't slow down after speeding up, doesn't have in-circuit pause buttons like Space Chem. Extremely difficult because of the tools. Yeah, I think I'm sold on not buying Prime Mover. Like, what I'm seeing as a programming game does not look as good as the other programming games available, and I don't know how many I really need to cover, so maybe 1 or 2 at most. Prime Mover shouldn't be in the top 5. Alright, so next game to consider we have is Princess.Loot.Pixel again, X2. which sounds like a bunch of gibberish. Save cats, kill dragons, kiss a princess again. This is 82% positive over 118 user reviews. This game seems to be heavily influenced / possibly stealing artwork from other games like The Binding of Isaac. This looks like it's a nice zoomed in style of game that you would say is heavily inspired by like Super Mario Brothers, whereas so many other games have the camera zoomed out really far and you can barely see the characters. Here you can see them a little bit at least. This came out December 27th, 2018. It's $4.99. There might be something here worth playing. Also, because it might not be as difficult a game as some of these other the games are. That being said, it's English and Russian, and that's scary. This is the continuation of the unpopular game Princess.Loot.Pixel again, which is mostly popular on Steam. So we could look at the negative reviews. There's a decent number of them. The game is fun for a little bit, but there are only 3 characters and the devs appear to abandon the game. Can't recommend. The game is okay. Alright, I want a refund. Fix the game. Buy Rogue Legacy instead. I've already covered Rogue Legacy. Yeah, I'm willing to believe those negative reviews also. This looks good in screenshot mode, but it doesn't particularly tell me that there's more than 5 minutes of gameplay in this. So this is going to leave the fall list. Let's see. Next to consider, we have Prismata, which is an early access and came out March 8th, 2018. There's Cripperian from Twitch. This is a card game? Because Cripperian plays Hearthstone more than anything else. Well, yeah, this looks like a collectible card game or a deck building game. It says absolutely no pay to win, but it does have in-app purchases. It's free to play. It's early access. Clearly, this card game did not succeed. So for that reason, there's no reason for me to cover it. Even though it's very positive, this is not a game that would replace Hearthstone. And it wouldn't beat Yu-Gi-Oh! It wouldn't beat Magic the Gathering or Gwent or Magic Arena. So yeah, Prismata's out. Trying to get to the end as quickly as possible at this point. Next we have a game called Pro Elium Fighting Game. It has 7 user reviews, came out October 18th, 2018. Was this a student project? Maybe. Otherwise, it's just not relevant. Robots fighting each other with lasers and lightning. Possibly not the best thing to do because it puts too much garbage on the screen. And robots just fighting other robots is not very visually interesting. Or fight suits. People in fight suits fighting other fight suits. It's not particularly interesting. It seems like there's a final boss that you have to fight. $13.99. They put out a picture showing all of the moves. Meanwhile, in comparison, you have Dragon Ball Fighter Z or Tekken or Street Fighter 5 or Ultra Street Fighter 4 or Guilty Gear. Many versions of Guilty Gear. There's each of these fighting games I've heard a lot more about. Let's see. Yeah, I guess maybe when I put this on the wish list or the follow list, I thought maybe it would get some more reviews, or maybe I put it on the follow list in October of 2018. Now you can see it clearly doesn't have any relevancy. And a fighting game with no player base is a problem. A fighting game without online multiplayer, which this does not say it has online multiplayer, it just says it has multiplayer, which would be local multiplayer, is a problem. So that's getting removed from the fall list, which we do have a pretty long list of games that are making it to the wish list, but we also have a very long list of things that aren't. In general, this was just a lot of games starting with the letter P. Next, we're considering Professor Madhouse, an adventurous game logic for young children. Came out June 4th, 2018. It has 3 user reviews. Doesn't look visually particularly interesting. It's not relevant. Doesn't seem like it's a tie-in for any kind of cartoon or anything like that that would give it some more relevance. $1.19. Here they're selling Deadliest to Catch the game from the same publisher. This is an English and Polish game that doesn't inspire any confidence either. There's a negative review with nothing written. Yep. Don't even really need to look at the reviews though. It's an irrelevant game. Just not enough people ever even gave it the time of day. Next we have a game called Project Downfall. This came out March 15th, 2019, and it's 50% positive with 10 user reviews. Now, in all fairness, I could leave this for 6 months and give it more of a chance. That being said, if you can't even get above 75% with 10 reviews, you're not likely to get any higher with 20. That's generally how percentages work. Yes, it's still in early access, but everything I'm seeing here shows me something I'm not really interested in looking at. Seems like it's just a modern attempt at making a, for lack of a better term, Doom clone with slightly different graphic options. Let's see. And half of these images are not loading even when I'm reloading the page. And I assume that's just my computer, not the page. Yeah, I see nothing appealing visually about this. Next we have to consider is called Prose Prologue. It's a free opening chapter to the Prose series. It's a story-based VR adventure with puzzle and horror elements. It came out August 30th, 2018. It's 77% positive. I guess the question to ask then is Prose continued? Seems like it, because there's a game called Prose Enlightenment that they're doing kind of the episodic thing. And this seems like a real game with real people that you actually interact with, which is not what you usually see in VR games. This may very well be nothing more than a walking simulator. Let's go over to Prose Enlightenment in comparison and see if this is worth putting on the follow list, because really that's what this would come down to is, do I want to put the entire game on the follow list and then put the prologue back on here as the first thing? And none of the images want to load. What languages does this support? English, Chinese, German, and Russian are the top few. This does look like a real game. Or at least an attempt at a real game. See the negative reviews. Don't buy in the state it is now. Although the gameplay is original and very interesting, it is riddled with many game-breaking glitches. There are many obvious glitches that just make me facepalm and completely obvious for the developers to see. Hit or miss the original definition of the meaning. All I get is a black void. So, Pro's enlightenment seems to me like it deserves a follow. So, I guess what I'll do is I'll type that down in my text file that's to the side of the screen. And then, because of that decision, Pro's prologue should stay on the follow list also. But again, worth mentioning, it's staying on the follow list because it's a VR only game and I'm probably never going to get a VR headset. So then the next thing we have to consider is Cyburst, and this is tagged as a side-scrolling 2D fighter. It has 2 user reviews, came out September 5th, 2018. This looks to me like it is a Smash Brothers clone with not a lot of polish on it. It seems like you're fighting against your friends the whole time. But then there are also some side-scrolling other elements. So is there a single-player game here? Or is it only player versus player? Because now what I'm seeing is a lot of single-player elements. I guess it doesn't matter. It's not relevant. This game failed to catch anybody's attention. I'll say the artwork is mediocre at best. It looks alright, but not great. Certainly when you see the characters as they're actually depicted. $2.99, English only. Single player and multiplayer, local multiplayer, no online multiplayer. Yeah, Cyburst, not making it to the wish list. It's just lack of relevancy. So many games we keep running into lack that relevancy. And it's an important metric to consider, certainly, when considering these games, because otherwise there would be hundreds upon hundreds of games on my wish list that I'd want to buy and cover, and it would just be insanity. There's not enough hours in the day to cover every single game that looks like it might be good, but I don't know because nobody else has ever played it or reviewed it. Next game we have to consider is Punch Planet, which looks like it is a slightly different art style. Maybe you would claim that to be a bad art style. It seems to be an odd combination of characters fighting each other. Came out November 8th, 2017. It's still in early access. It's $19.99. So even though this is 97% positive of 42 user reviews, the fact that it's just not finished and it's a fighting game makes no sense. And I would be very lenient, quite frankly, to somebody who put out a game that was a fighting game and said it was out of early access, or just sold it as a finished product and then continued to work on it and put out patches to do fighting balance. That's how most fighting games go. They come out not as early access games and then they get patched. This game is so old it was a Steam Greenlight game and it's still in early access. Yeah, Punch Planet needs to leave the follow list. It's, as far as I'm concerned, abandoned. Next, I guess when everything's said and done, this is considered pupil wandering VR, although I guess that's how it's ordered in the list. It's an Asian style horror VR game, focuses on immersive horror atmosphere. We've seen a few of these so far. It's 96% positive, came out May 7th, 2019, so it hasn't even been out for that long. It's early access though, so I don't really need to consider it. It's another Asian slight horror game, and we could certainly cover a couple of them. That being said, if some of the more famous Japanese horror games like Fatal Frame just came to PC, I wouldn't be trying as hard. And clearly this is a PlayStation video because those were PlayStation controls. Like, this looks very much like Fatal Frame. But since it's early access, I'll just leave it on the fall list and consider it later. Next we have Puppet Blaster, which might be a VR game too. Let's see, 100% positive with 13 user reviews. Came out October 16th, 2018. Requires VR. It's free. This cartoony art style for a VR game probably wouldn't work if I was to guess, but I'm not 100% sure. It might work just fine. The video that's showing seems like you're controlling the puppet. Oh, why would you do that though? Like, why would that be the control method that you would want to experiment with while playing in VR? It seems really, really weird. So you're marionetting this guy, making him shoot a bunch of zombies. I suppose that is slightly different than just shooting the zombies yourself, but it's not better by any means. It's way, way worse. It's 100% positive, so I really don't have any reviews to look at that I care about. I just don't think in this case that the game's unique puppeteering system sells itself particularly in an interesting way. It really seems like it's something that's just being done for the sake of saying it was done. This really doesn't line up or feel like a smart gameplay development system or developed system. Just seems silly. So for that reason, I'm gonna remove Puppet Blaster from the fall list. There's plenty of other games on Steam, certainly VR games even, that worth looking at. For instance, Puppy Chef Academy, which is also a VR game, came out September 7th, 2018. It's a virtual reality cooking experience designed to help you learn how to cook without the stress or mess of a real kitchen. A new game called Cooking Simulator just recently came out as of this recording. That looked like it might be slightly interesting in a cooking simulator way, although it might also be like Goat Simulator, where you're not really doing actual cooking, and instead you're just joking and starting fires. There might be something here, but it seems like you're only going to learn maybe a dozen or two cooking elements, and that's it. And it seems like in this case everything is hand programmed. This weird Western style of animation designed to look like a anime style of animation is weird. The foods you're learning to cook are not making a lot of sense either. It's free to play. Apparently it wasn't free to play originally. This almost is a good idea for little kids. It's like a virtual novel where you get to learn about cooking recipes and follow along some rudimentary motion control actions. There are 12 different recipes rated 8 out of 10. Yeah. Like, for the price, for free, this feels like it's gonna get a special exception and stay on the follow list. There's a lack of relevancy here, definitely, though. And clearly what you would have wanted to do is have this developer continue to work on the game and add more recipes, or have like a non-VR but mobile version of this very game and let it get updates or in-app purchases or ad support so that they could constantly add more recipes. There are plenty of recipe sites on the internet. This game is the only other game that they made, and it's mixed reviewed. Yeah, I could see a mobile game where you had these two characters, these pretty badly drawn characters, and you just would once a week or once a day get a new recipe that was pretty much just a cutscene, and that was it. See, now they just made a mistake. You do not crack an egg on the bowl of on the edge of a bowl. You always crack an egg on the flat surface of the table. If you crack it on the edge of a bowl, you're going to shove shell into your eggs. And flipping an omelet and folding an omelet over takes real world skill. And it's not something that you're really going to learn from this. So I'd almost argue you're better off, instead of even downloading this free software, you're probably better off just teaching your kids to cook for real. It's a hobby that will help them for the rest of their life, and kids as young as 4 or 5 can be slowly introduced to the idea of cooking pretty easily. Yeah. I feel like this is just a game that's really going to take up space. Oops. I blurred it out. When did I do that? Hopefully not too long ago. Sorry if the last few games have been blurry. Yeah, I really think like this game would just be taking up space, and if you want a kid to learn cooking, this isn't going to be a long-term solution. It's not going to be a good education. It's just kind of bad in every way, even though it's free. So, Puppy Chef Arcade. The puppy, I assume because these are dog humanoids. Like, it just seems like it's all over the place and just not good enough. Alright, moving on. Yeah, I hope I didn't blur the previous games like Puppet Blaster. I'm fairly certain I didn't blur that out. Or Punch Planet. Or Cyburst. We could go back and look at the last 5 or so of them that we've looked at. Next we have a game to consider, Puyo Puyo Champions. Puyo Puyo being a Tetris-like game. It's slightly different in the way it plays, but not by much, and very popular. It's published by Sega, made by Sonic Team. It is 77% positive for 155 user reviews. It's $9.99. It has a single player and online multiplayer and local multiplayer, so it looks good enough for me. I could consider it next to Puyo Puyo Tetris, which is another game that's I think already on my wish list, but Here you have somebody. I recommend Puyo Puyo Tetris over this version of the game, so that's something to consider. But I guess if you've played Puyo Puyo Tetris, Puyo Puyo Champions might be a bit more pure or more of the same game. So I think this can easily be put on the wish list. I don't know personally how long I would actually play this, though. I might spend only an hour on it, in all fairness. So anyways, I think we probably are close to the end if we're at PUY. Yep. Next game we have on Steam to consider is Pythagoras, which I believe is misspelled here. If you're trying to spell it Pythagoras, Perpetual Motion Machine, which Pythagoras, to my knowledge, did not have a perpetual motion machine as a concept or idea. It says 2 user reviews, came out August 11th, 2017. It's $9.99. What is this actual game, though? It seems to me like it's pretty much just a standard puzzle game where you're trying to get the balls, I guess, to spin the gears, and once they spin the gears enough, it becomes an elevator that sends him upward. Alright, so it's just puzzles. Just marble puzzles, for lack of a better term. This is from publisher DL Site, again known for not publishing the greatest of games. They want $9.99 for this. It's English and simplified Chinese, which is a red flag. I could look for negative reviews, but it only has 4 positive reviews. Only one of those is English. So not a relevant game by any means. This is definitely leaving the follow list. In fact, if I were to blacklist an entire publisher, which I really don't do just because they publish bad games, they have to do something really awful like threaten the DMCA YouTubers or steal content or sue people or something like that. They have to do something really morally objectionable. But if I was going to start blacklisting publishers for publishing bad games, DL Site would be in the top 3 of publishers not to trust. Alright, well, it took a while. It took 2 hours and 42 minutes, according to my clock, to get through all the games starting with P. We ended up with, I would say, about 12, maybe 15 games that are going to the wish list. So we made some good progress, and there was almost certainly about 60 or more games that are getting removed from the follow list, which hopefully means next time I need to do a follow list cleanup in 6 months or a year from now. These kind of videos will be a lot shorter. It would be nice if I could go through a single letter of the alphabet in like 5 minutes. Anyways, that's it for this recording. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos, because that helps me with YouTube and tells them that my videos are worth watching. When you subscribe, make sure you click the notification bell, get the pull down next to it, click to see all notifications, because that's the only way you even have a chance of seeing notifications from YouTube. Also, you can friend or follow me on social media sites to get backup notifications. If you want to support me even further, there's a link down below to Patreon, which would be greatly appreciated. Or, the whole reason we're here is we're cleaning up the wishlist. So if you want to friend me on Steam and gift me a game off my wishlist, that would be very helpful. Remember, there's always a Steam sale around the corner. Or if you don't want to decide, you can also gift gift cards, or just pick a game you'd like to see me cover, even if it's not on the wishlist, and I'll cover it. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.